Hello world and YouTube, my name is Hassan Al-Mahi. I'm 18 years old from Ontario, Canada. And today's date is March 24th, 2022. It is dark outside. And I just wanted to talk to you today about problems surrounding Gen Z, my generation Zoomers that are growing up with kind of the thoughts and attitudes and problems in society. So this is a part 1 video. And in this video I just want to talk about abortion, the culture war surrounding the media, the internet, and how it all kind of connects together, and also the social issues with toxic masculinity, as they call it. So, in terms of abortion, we have to define what abortion is and also state the arguments, the debates, the sides of it. So, in terms of abortion from a medical and philosophical definition, we can define it as a lawful, or in moralistic standpoint, a lawful or unlawful termination of a woman since inception to abort a fetus from her body, leaving it to survive without the proper nutrition biologically that is needed for a baby to survive and grow into a month-old entity, or the shape of an entity of a human being. So, in terms of one of the main arguments inside for this is the pro-life movement. So the pro-life movement emphasizes that all life is valuable. All babies should be born, whether that be full and partial, with disease and deformities. Without all babies are born. In a sense, it's like more realistically, it allows no abortion in the sense of women, like it is unlawful, and in a sense it's also criminalizing it. So with that though, many of the main points within the pro-life movement is also they talk about like regulation, so what certain authorities and social opinions, issues within abortion should be regulated somehow. So for example, Planned Parenthood, a common authority on issues dealing with parental advices and parental doings. Sorry, I couldn't think of anything to say there. But they have an authority, they work with medical personnel in terms of determining what these things mean, what has been observed by science, by reality, by philosophy, by physiology. But with that said, because there's so much more to like this abortion thing than just simply like a medical and morale issue. It's much more. It's reaching into the culture, into the mainstream. And the fact is that regulating it will in this case, it will allow more awareness on why abortion should not be allowed for these reasons. Simply because even in cases where the woman, through the inception, it was not consensual, so it was through maybe sexual assault, through incest, rape, these kind of things, crimes. But that still doesn't justify that you have to kill a baby. As probably within my speech, I am with the pro-life movement. I support that all babies should live. But there is one rare genetic exception in terms of like the natural, what some things can happen naturally. What's really rare is that through inception of the pregnancy, the baby has a chance of killing your mother. Now, does that change it? Yes, if legally and authoritatively medical personnel, they examine the baby, they look into the science, they look into the x-rays, they determine that this baby will be a danger to the mother, and then through a judicial system where a judge, the jurisprudence within their realms can determine and come up to conclusions with medical authorities that yes, this woman in this rare case can get abortion, then yeah, that's one rare exception statistically. And then so that's pro-life. The other side is pro-choice, that women have a right, my body, my choice, to abort their baby. And then obviously one would simply ask, though, then do men in this world get no opinion on abortion? Well, of course not. Men created half the baby, so like their opinion on it and their words on it hold the same value that a woman has on it. It's like just natural to think that. But basically, that whole movement emphasizes more on occurrences of not marginalized but rare cases in which the most unlawful abortions can happen, such as when like they can't determine is there a mental deficiency, and that suddenly gives you the right like to kill your baby. Because they're saying by keeping abortion safe, legal, and accessible, and the woman's right to choose, they're essentially admitting that by no scientific definition can they determine whether any of these things can actually be physiologically true. That whole side is just a moralistic standpoint. Of course, it's a debate that it requires some critical thinking. It's not like a light issue. We're talking about life here. So those are the two sides. I hope you get it, and obviously I'm trying to stay within the realms of showing both sides here, because both sides are important to get the full picture. And so the next topic I want to talk about is the culture war that's surrounding my generation, and that's been happening in the media. It's been happening for a few years in terms of like kind of when this generation started, when these things began, or they were starting to become more prevalent in this case. So what I'm talking about is, in the beginning, when like I was young, even people my age can attest to this, when we were young, we didn't really grow up with the idea of politics and all this worrying about the world's issues and in a sense becoming responsible, thinking about things that we didn't think about because we didn't have the mental capacity. In terms of what's happening with the culture war, is it seems now that more kids are getting involved in issues that they should not be getting involved in. The government, the media, all of them, they're in on it, in a sense that it's no longer about freedom to live, but now freedom to indoctrinate. So what I mean by that is, the narrative is very shifting towards one side and one opinion or group. We'll call them the leftists. That's what they are. The leftists have been, for years, campaigning ideas, campaigning their free speech. And in a sense, this becomes controversial because to them, many of their ideas have things to do, ideas within society that they want to speak out against, or that think, but we have a problem in this society, we should all work together to see if we come up with a conclusion, whether that in the form of protests and stuff. And in the beginning, it was very peaceful. It wasn't, in a sense, where in a few minutes now I'll explain, it's gotten much more violent, and actually it's become hate speech. So, a political protest where people are discussing issues and holding signs, bringing attention through that way. It's not necessarily, there's nothing wrong with it, because they want their opinion heard, they want their voice heard. In the beginning that was fine, but as I realized, I started growing up older, I noticed the narrative started shifting. And this is within, for example, the media. The media has now all of a sudden turned this cult, I call them, the leftists, this group of people, into glamorizing them because of their ideas. And their ideas are completely radical, some of them. So the media, what they're doing is, through their own will, they know how some of these ridiculous ideas can seem, because some of the ideas, such as when they're teaching kids now about gender ideology and this critical race theory, which is all BS, it's just anyone with half a brain can identify that this is like pure indoctrination. This is it has nothing to do with consent, nothing to do with science. It's all just growing up a generation where kids will not really know who they are because they're not given a chance to. These are people that want to influence kids when kids don't even have the ability to be influenced yet. They haven't seen the world for what it really is. So anyways, just the political pawns, right? It's disgusting. But in the media, mainstream media, what we call now, we get our news from news corporations. They're not considered mainstream. So the idea of mainstream, the topics that are covered in mainstream media, that is what we see, that are most prevalent are considered mainstream. So, such as topics on abortion and opinion. But what I realize with all these big media companies, especially here in Canada with CBC and CTV, they like to broadcast one side of view, don't bring in anyone else, and then completely like become like paranoid and all of a sudden attacking. So this is like just simply, for me, like whenever now, like when I read up on the news and stuff, I always have to fact check, because fact checking, I like to keep up with the facts, keep up with the truth. But then all of a sudden you have debates and stuff on CTV and stuff, and sometimes they're not even done fairly, because they clearly show lenience to the left. A lot of them are hypocritical, and then a lot of them are just outright like they think they can show like their corruption and literally their anti-moralistic standpoints on TV and get away with it. In terms of even what you could argue the government, and on a philosophical level, what they have an influence on all of this. Well, it's very simple. Corporations, media, how we see things, how we perceive things, is, especially like for kids, is usually how we go. We don't give it enough thought. And all of these powers, in a sense, these hierarchies, these social hierarchies, in the sense that one is not necessarily greater than the other, but they're all connected. There's not necessarily a hierarchy, but I'm just going to describe it that way, is working together not necessarily for the benefits and freedoms and the wants of the people, but within their own interests. And so that raises the question, what government is there that can govern this, our people, Canadians, when they have no interests in us, and interest in us economically, in terms of even our foreign affairs, our reconciliation with the natives, our well-beings, our home prices, our gas prices, our food prices, our work, etc. And with this growing, I thought with this mainstream media, it's just become now where it's like really depressing to live in, because now like everyone's hating on each other in a sense that no one can come to a basis of reality anymore. Like some people cannot tell me what a woman is. They cannot define something so simple that a 6th grader in biology, even just from in terms of a biological standpoint, can define. It's just if are people even rational anymore? And this culture war has it's not even us, the rational thinking adult. It's infected mostly our children. It's been a poison that's been literally injected into our social hierarchies, and children are the byproducts. When most of the time I feel like it's just narcissism corruption that's fueling this kind of mainstream culture. And a lot of the time, it's even like unconstitutional. It's writing out free speech, because we have Canadians, we all have the right to speak, say whatever we want, no matter what other person thinks of it, no matter nothing being coerced in it. We all have that right. So it's just we don't want the next generation of all these young kids to grow up with these ridiculous ideas, which are completely far from reality. And it's not even that when they grow up they're going to think that this is normal. They're going to think this is not normal. They're going to be confused for sure. Because when you see something that is not biological, when they grow up and they see something that is biological, we just completely killed their mind. And the hypocrisy, it's all being done in terms of left turns. It's all being done in an attempt to open mind our children, in an attempt to show children that you should look at everyone with pride, with dignity, with respect, when really it's just a guise for indoctrination. And any person who clearly went into the underlying decisions and the actions of this leftist cult would be able to see through that. Sometimes I cannot speak. But what's even more important now is I've been kind of warning and telling my friends that I would assume this would happen for years. Because the thing is, whenever someone challenges the mainstream media, it's always either they get misrepresented or they get completely silenced. Like, literally, we live in an authoritarian state where we can get silenced, or even through terms of higher powers we get completely marginalized and pushed to the side. So, of course, that is just like unacceptable. It's dehumanizing. And even now, I can say with certainty, knowing now with that hindsight, now this is what happened. It started Bill C-16. The Canadian Senate was confirmed about 2 months ago. It was about some bill with this gender expression crazy thing, how literally parents, the most authoritative people to grow up their children, can now, by the basis of what they describe discrimination of gender expression, which I don't even know what that means. What is discrimination? It makes no sense because it doesn't exist. But can now be criminalized and penalized for if found guilty. It's like, what the heck? That is absolutely crazy. I truly don't know how that bill got through. So, with that, it just shows that parents are losing their ability in this generation, in this society, with all the technology we have, with all the advancements we have, with all the debates we have, with all the discussions, and whatever's going on in the world. Parents, according to this is the government saying this now, you are slowly losing the ability to be able to parent your child. But even though you could be the biological parent of that boy, that gives you more the right, and the right of any parent to bring up their child as a God-given gift. And that's true according to anyone. The government has no right to take away your child based on these ridiculous practices or these ridiculous laws that are going into place. But anyways, that's basically the whole summary of the culture war in a general overview. what's been going on these past, I would say, 6 to 10 years, what I've experienced, this movement is very big on a whole, and part of the problem is even that the people who are against this, especially in terms of, let's like talk politics here, the conservatives, which I agree with their political ideology, and even in this case the liberals in Canada, some of the rational liberals on the left are being marginalized by this group, and they're, in a sense, they're afraid to speak out, because if they know like that this group can silence them, there's repercussions, but the repercussions don't justify that when you see something, you should say something. And whether that applies even if you have power, words are very powerful, they can influence too. Words and art and knowledge, how we learn. There's a learning, there's a creative thinking process to it. But anyways, that was the topic on culture war, and then I just want to talk about something that is not personal but special to me because I find it so ridiculous, and that's the social issue, what society has deemed as what men can be toxic. So what I'm talking about is, men toxicity is, it's a made-up term, but I'll explain it in the words of leftists and people who claim it exists. Men toxicity is the fact that men, in non-proven statistical cases, are responsible for most of what the toxicity of society produces. So toxicity, what does that mean? Well, for example, they claim that there is a rape culture within men. So this rape culture seems that men, through sexually driven hormones, are more likely to rape women and sexually assault women, and that all men, no matter what their personality is like, how they were brought up, how their masculinity is defined, should be completely erased, and we should completely go against that gender. That will kill a gender. What that is gender discrimination. It's marginalizing men. If that were such a case where men were the leading statistic of that, it's nothing really to do with the men. It has to do with more, rather, the mindset of men in terms of whether there's leading statistics about rape cases and things like that. But in terms of the abortion discussion that I talked about in the beginning, there is an interesting paper that I read about. It's about the abortion and methodical, psychological, and scientific approaches done by the APA, American Psychological Association, and it gives a very in-depth procedure on how gestation is dealt with within women who are thinking about aborting their babies, and the scientific explanations behind why it's actually not a desirable outcome for women, whether that leading, for example, to mental challenges after abortions happen. And when I was talking about the culture war, I gave you a description of kind of what's been happening mainstream, but what I really like about it is the fact that it's so prevalent with our neighbors in the South that a lot of the problems are also problems within like our society, what's happening to our youth, and even to me as I was growing up, and it still is happening to me, it's still happening to all of us. There's this book and this article that was published called Cultural War on American Basis. It gives a very nice overview of when this kind of this sociology of uh, some people call it woke culture, but in a sense it was a created culture with no like real definition of when it all started, a basis of when it started changing the minds of people. And then also like there's this Dalhousie University published a paper which was really nice on how we define cultural jurisdictions. So the fact is that we, even in Canadian society, we grow up with so many multicultural people and multi-ethnicities, and how we reconcile that. And renew it as the idea of critical race theory suggests, some mass theories, how we not break boundaries, but how we stop talking about how we can solve problems of actual systemic racism and then discrimination based on facts and practical knowledge. With men being toxic, I just want to say that if men were really blamed for that, if women really truly felt that way, well then it wouldn't make no sense, because if that was the thought process of every single person on earth, then man is guilty for just being a man, with no actual evidence that he did something wrong or there was some wrongdoing against him, that he should just be shunned and outcast by society. This thought would kill half of humanity. And in a world filled only with women, it would be death. And in a world filled only with men, it would be anarchy. See what I'm saying? Thank you very much. I will leave all my sources that I stated down in the description below if you want to check it out. Have a good night or day, wherever it is you're watching this in the world. And thank you.